Once was a swagman camped by a billabong under the shade of a coolabah tree. As he sat, as he watched and waited while his billy boiled, who'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnie Lukes here at the Crossroads, and we've got an interesting day ahead, and I'd like to welcome our panel guests from Adelaide. Welcome, Beata. Hello, Beata.
Good morning, everyone.
And from Narracourt, Jennifer. Welcome, Jennifer.
Good morning, all.
And from Trafalgar in Victoria, Judith Auchterlonie. Welcome.
Yes, thanks, Arnie. Good morning, all.
Okay, good. No worries. Now, what we'd like to talk about today is we'd like to place it on the table about family health, and in particular, I want to bring up the subject of fluoride because I think fluoride is most important. I've just recently read some documents on fluoride, and I think that we've got to actually go back to square one with this whole thing. Now, if I go to a doctor and I tell a doctor that I have an issue, the doctor's going to take into account my unique circumstances, my case history, and he's also possibly going to do some tests, send blood tests away to see and monitor my well-being during a course of remediation. Now, the doctor constantly monitors his treatment of me, and this treatment is done. If you're anything like, say, my senior mother, she is monitored possibly fortnightly. A nurse comes around, takes her blood, they test it all to see where she is in regard to her prescriptions and her health. Now, when we talk about fluoride, it's nothing of the kind. It's a blanket dose. It doesn't matter your body weight, mass, age, condition, whether you have teeth or no teeth, and it's a blanket dose for everyone. And the other side of it too, while it's a blanket dose, is if you happen to live in the closer to the desert areas of Australia, you could be drinking 12-15 litres of water a day just to hydrate, because this is the method used for managing heat stress. Now, on the basis of that means that you're going to accumulate significant volume of fluoride in your body. The other point to make is, apart from health on that, is that also that fluoride as a treatment for cavities, right? Yeah, in regard to your teeth, as a treatment, is to be applied externally on the surface of the tooth, not orally through the bones, through the bloodstream. So the methodology is incorrect. Now, the next point I'll make, and then I'm going to open the floor for you girls. The next point I'll make is that fluoride as a product added to the water supply is not of a medical grade. Rather, it is just simply industrial waste. Now, that to me, the argument is there before us, and if this is a way of managing our health, I think it's absurd. There's no scientific reason for it. There's no justification. There's certainly no monitoring of it as to the assessment. And as we recently saw with the addition of fluoride to the Queensland water, the level of cavities for all the age groups across Queensland was no different than the rest of Australia. All right, Jennifer, you've got the floor.
Yes, Arnie. Well, they're very good points, and I agree with them. And fluoride has been a vexed question for a very long time around the world, as well as in Australia. And it continues, and we're bringing it to light here. Many countries have realised that it is dangerous and not a good thing to do, and they have decommissioned or decided to stop adding it to their water supplies. So, as you said, a doctor monitors blood, and yet somebody in authority is giving us fluoride en masse, and this is what is so wrong, that we don't have any way of opting out when it's put in the water supply, and it's a blatant denial of our basic right of freedom of choice. And I think it is a very ill-advised government policy, and it has been right from the word go, and it's about time that we looked at it more closely and informed ourselves and decided to turn the fluoride tap off.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm pleased you sort of placed that on the floor as your point of view, and I think it's valid. I think the arguments are valid. Judith Auchterlonie, your turn on the floor.
Oh, thank you, Arnie. I really am concerned about fluoride and the willingness of people to accept it as a standard treatment for dental health, and they don't question it. And I feel really burdened with getting the information out to people so that they can be informed and make that decision and not just accept the dentists and the toothpaste company's words that fluoride is safe. And I think I have showed you. I bought some toothpaste from supermarket last week. It says on it's for children, it says on the front, low fluoride. Now, why do they say that? Is it important that children don't get much fluoride? Are they acknowledging now, the companies, that fluoride's becoming an issue? And it says on the back, when children clean their teeth, they must not swallow it. They've got to spit it out. Goodness me, you shudder at the thought of the numbers of children out there that are swallowing their toothpaste and getting that dose of fluoride that they don't need. I feel really strongly about pushing the issue of banning fluoride. Let's get rid of it. I haven't read anything that says a good word about fluoride. My last reading was actually this morning, how fluoride affects the consciousness and the will to act. What are we doing to ourselves?
Thank you, Judy. That's excellent. That's a very good opening salvo and a good solid argument. What are we doing to ourselves when, and something I haven't brought up, and I'm going to talk about prisoners of war in the Second World War, but I won't bring that up now. I'll let Beata have the floor. Beata.
Since Judy has mentioned consciousness and how it affects us, because it's a neurotoxin, we should really review the whole situation. The problem is that Australia follows very closely behind our best friend USA, and we follow blindly. So since they started fluoridation of water, so did we. And now Queensland is falling among incredible opposition from the little towns over the place to stop it and not to have it added to the water supply. So now the question is, why discussion on the subject of any kind of review that would be in public domain? Instead, it's dictated by the bureaucrats that it needs to be done, and there is no discussion.
Thank you, Beata. That's very good. Exactly right. The bureaucrats are making the decision, and you've got to sort of look at it and say, well, if the efficacy, if the science is there, then place the science on the table and let's all have a look at it. And on the basis that it's there for us to look at. Now, I said before that Queensland had no better or worse dental condition prior to fluoridation than the rest of Australia. And that's current. That's a whole nation of 30 million people statistically to look at. And it's current, and 30 million people, and there's no difference. So why are we adding fluoride to the water? Now, I come back, I touched on it before, but I'm gonna let you know. There was a bloke called Dickinson. He was a member of the Parliament, Victoria, for South Barwon, and he presented the case that scientists from America, as Europe was falling into the Second World War, scientists from America went across and they assessed how prisoners of war were managed. And in both the German and Soviet prisoner of war camps, they found that fluoride was added to the water in order to stupefy, in order to basically settle down the prisoners so that they became malleable and easily managed. And they used it as a method, basically as an anaesthetising the prisoners of war. Now, before the end of the Second World War, with this fresh knowledge in their kitty, the Americans started to place fluoride in their local water supplies. And there was a place in Michigan, I think, I can't remember the name of it, it's in Wikipedia, but they had it there about 6 or 8 months before the war in Europe ended. They already started putting, so that means that they knew about it sufficient time before in order to design and build all the infrastructure and then place this, what is a waste product from steel, aluminium or fertilizer industries. It's a waste product, not even a medical grade, and they placed it in the water of their own towns. They started placing in the water of their own towns in order to control the population. This is a ruthless attitude towards the community. And in Australia, Beaconsfield, Tasmania, 1953. So we weren't that far behind. 8 years after the war, Australia, as a people, as a government, decided, yep, we're going to start experimenting with our population. We're going to start injecting them with an industrial waste product at a certain ratio. I mean, a ratio of what? They say fluoride. Fluoride itself is not a medical, it's not a scientific name for a product. If it comes from the aluminium industry, it is a different product to what comes from the fertilizer industry, as comes from the steel industry. And they're injecting it in our water. Now, okay, enough of that. This to me is just Sovietizing of our own government, and they're using it to control us. But the fact is that there's got to be an alternative in regard to oral hygiene apart from fluoride. And I know there is, and I know there's a bloke called Sally Fallon Weston Price, scientist, and I'm going to hand over to Beata to bring us up to date as to her understanding of what this scientist did. Beata.
Weston Price was a dentist who went around the world to study the indigenous communities, and one of them was Australian, Queensland. I can't remember the place, but he came to study the community living down the shore, the coast, and he found, similar to other places around the world, among others, there was Shetland Islands, etc. That people in those communities were feeding themselves using all sorts of seafood, basically very rich in fish oils, and that's what gave them beautiful broad faces and strong jaws and beautiful teeth. And they lived their whole lives without having dental caries, even though they did not brush. On the other hand, once the children of those communities have moved with their parents to communities where they were mixed with the whites and where the shops were available with plenty of sugar and white flour to buy, the dental caries started. And not only that, babies were born with totally differently shaped head and jaw and teeth. So now we are in the situation where most children are having to undergo extraction of 4 teeth in their mouth because there is not enough room in the jaw for all those teeth. Has that happened to your grandchildren or your children?
Thank you, Beata. Yes, it does. It does beg review, and it does beg reconsideration. With the indigenous peoples that Weston Price went around the world to have a look at, they had beautiful round faces, and they had a lovely square jaw and a lovely bridge of straight teeth and this gorgeous smile. And yes, there were Aboriginals in Australia who had traditional foods. They called it traditional foods or sacred foods, and they would go out of their way. Some of the tribes in the Sally Fallon video that I watched, some of the tribes would actually trek to the coast in order to get these sacred foods and then bring them back to the village, and they would do that every year, and they would save them especially for the fertile women and the young children, as part of their part of their preserving their culture. So this is oral hygiene from ancient peoples, and they knew, and we've forgotten these things. Yes, Jennifer Grundy.
Yes, well, that's all very interesting information, and it is so that diet is very important and the main part of our health, really. It always has been and always will be. And the more we stick to the natural side, the better we are for it, of course. And the more primitive people, I mean, they went out and hunted their food and ate fresh and drank pure water, good water, and the air was clean and everything that goes along with it. Although it was very difficult for them to do it, they benefit in their health in general. But now, of course, we have so much choice, and food is being preserved and changed in many ways. So even today, we can still find the better food to eat, the fresh food, and we don't need to buy processed food to survive and be healthy, of course.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's right. Now the thing that I noticed with the Sally Fallon videos, Western Price, was that certain indigenous populations had a history, had a tradition of eating the entire beast that they would kill. If the Eskimo killed a seal or an elk or whatever, or a bear, they would consume all of it, and that included the organs. Now, as a people, we've sort of drifted away from that. I know with my father, he was big on liverwurst and herrings, fish, right? Herrings. He was big on it. And photos of my dad, there he is, broad jaw, beautiful straight teeth, lovely smile. And I'm thinking Sally Fallon was right, because he was living not far from the coast, but he certainly had those traditional foods, strong in liver or large in liver and fish oils. Righto. Judy Auchterlonie.
Yes, thank you. I heartily agree. Diet's so important.
Could you do me a favour, Judy, and just bring your
Yes.
microphone down? Bring it down. That's it.
Oh,
Yeah, that'll do.
Diet's so important. You know, young mums today are under so much pressure with work and so many other things that their ability to prepare food, even though wholesome food is simple to prepare, it's the little things for mums that matter, and it's a time issue, and I think they just don't quite realise how important fresh food is. Well, they hear it, they know it, but to actually use fresh food in their children's diets all the time can be a challenge to mums. I know a young mum who mostly feeds her children raw food now, and I'm expecting them to look really wonderfully healthy soon, and the additives in processed food is a side issue, I know, but the additives are scary and account for so much attention deficit disorder and other problems that families are having nowadays with their children, I think.
No worries. Thank you, Judy. I think your points are quite valid, that we certainly have moved away from a raw food diet, and now it's processed food, and then to compound that, we've got additives in our food, and so we've got to assess: are we healthier? Are our children healthier than the previous generation, or is there an increase in autism? Is there an increase in attention deficit? Is there an increase in immuno problems, the immune system problems? Are our bodies actually not happy with what we're feeding them? And I think it's I mean, I was a single bloke for a few years, and it's not easy. I completely feel for the family person, the person at home who's responsible for preparing meals. It's not an easy task, and you're at it all the time. And if you've got a lot of other demands, work, career, husband or wife, outlaws, someone who's sick, it's huge, absolutely huge, and it is so demanding on them. But the fact is that our health is first. It's first and foremost, and we've just got to take up that extra bit. It's fundamental. All right, back to Beata. Beata.
There is so much pressure on the women, isn't there? More than ever, because of that added factor of having to work just to make the ends meet. And so the woman has to sacrifice so many other things. That's why the processed food comes in, because takeaway is much faster. But the compromise made that way is not worth it in terms of lost health. And that goes for the entire family. And if you've got someone who is sick and you're looking after them as well, well, that brings the whole thing into another perspective altogether. So we are being actually under total, what do you call it?
Attack.
Attack. That's it. Thank you, love. under an attack from all sides. We've got pollution, which contains fluoride in it. We've got fluoride in the water that goes on our gardens, and we unwittingly would have to use it if we're not using rainwater on our garden. And if we're growing veggies, all that fluoride accumulates in those veggies. And again, if we've got fluoridated water in the house, that means drinking, cooking is done with that water, and also we're taking shower in that water, absorbing it through the skin. So considering that it is a neurotoxin that destroys the brain, and it's a poison equivalent, I believe, to arsenic. Could you please explain?
Thank you, Beata. That's a very solid argument there. Explain why we're putting a neurotoxin. You say fluoride's not a neurotoxin? Okay. Material safety data sheet. I've got them. If I haven't got them here, I've got them next door where Beata is on the desk. And material safety data sheet about fluoride. And it warns you in the material safety data sheet, which is issued by the United Nations World Health Organization. Don't say they don't know about it. It's there in black and white if you take the time to do. It warns you that fluoride passes across the placenta. It passes across it. So what the mother ingests, unknowingly, unwittingly, she passes to this developing child. And of course the brain, nervous system, these are a pivotal part of the whole future of the well-being of that beautiful human creature in the womb. And we're polluting it. And that's that's not science. That's not science. This is we're being Sovietized, and this is part of the prison camp, the world prison camp, really, in our own backyard. The arguments there. Take up your burden, your responsibility to actually find out for yourself. Don't listen to them, because they're not speaking the truth. Jenny, Grundy.
Yes, well, as you said, the United Nations claimed that the fluoride was a neurotoxin, and if it affects your nervous system, it affects everything, of course, doesn't it? Your brain is affected, and then your whole body. And there is a lot of autoimmune disease around, and many of these neuro complaints, and I think more now than we ever heard before, maybe because of more information, you tend to hear more about it. But once upon a time, you didn't hear so much about these things. But now there's so much of it around. So you wonder what is causing this to be more prevalent. And you can look at food, and of course it's the water we drink and the air we breathe, and everything that goes into our bodies affects our health. And without good health, well, then you have nothing really. And as you get older, you realise this more and more. When you're young, you tend to take these things for granted and live your life and do these things and probably get away with it. But of course, your cells are dying and replacing all the time. So we need to feed them, and whatever we consume either helps them to increase and grow again in a healthy way, or it helps them deteriorate, I suppose. And as we get older, I think our cells don't replace as readily as when we're young. So we tend to need to think about our diet and our health in general, even more so, to keep ourselves going and able to be reasonably active and contribute in some way.
Thank you for that, Jenny. That's exactly right. I'm a senior person. I've got grey hair, and I can tell you that diet is a very important part of our family strategy. And we've got about 40 fruit trees in our yard. Some of them not big, some small, but the fact is we progressively harvest, almost all the time across the year. We're progressively harvesting, and that's absolutely beautiful. You know, dwarf trees, doesn't matter. You still harvest something. A bucket of this, a bucket of that. The other week we harvested walnuts, and I tell you, that's a treat. That's a treasure. And I know that when we're harvesting the prune plums, which my wife loves, there's a big smile on her dial too. We love our harvesting, and it's all part of it. And we try and minimise even our plants' exposure, certainly our chooks, and that exposure to anything other than healthy food. Judy.
Yes, one other thing about families and food is the cost of organic food. It makes it very hard for mums to be conscientious sometimes about their children's diet because the product is organic with no added chemicals or fertilisers or anything. Suddenly it's a dearer product. I find that quite amusing. Unfortunately, it shows up around here. Any organic food you buy is usually at a cost compared to the normal food, sometimes even half as much dear again, and I get challenged by that. But I was reading this morning about fluoride suppressing our consciousness, which is what you've touched on earlier with the prisoners of war, that it affects the pineal gland. The claim here is that it affects the pineal gland in the brain and makes, I think it's calcium on the gland, and it affects our thinking, the claim here is that it could have grave effects both physically and spiritually upon humanity. Now, the spiritual side of that is something to consider too. Without a spiritual side to us, we're a lost civilization, aren't we? That people could have no spiritual side to them is a scary thought. Would they stop believing in God? Would they not even consider God's out there somewhere? The spiritual side, if we're spiritual people, and that's really important.
Thank you.
People that are organising the fluoride bombardment on humanity have much to answer for.
Thank you, Judy. That's a beautiful statement. I am reminded of the work of Ian McGilchrist and Roderick Tweedy. They talk about the two hemispheres of the brain, and I noted in their books, both of them, how the personality of the left hemisphere is completely different to the personality of the right hemisphere. And most of these ailments of people who've had schizophrenia or strokes and or an imparting of the membrane between the two halves of the brain, they've actually, science has been at this, pursuing the characteristics of the patterns in order to understand the brain function more deeply. And what it shows me is that if we lose our imagination now, Judy, you talked about our spiritual side. If we lose our imagination, and this is the right hemisphere of the brain, which actually engages. It looks at, when you communicate with someone, instead of looking at the mouth, you actually look at the eyes, and you're able to gauge facial expression and mood and the nuances of the unsaid or unspoken things within a conversation. And this is the imagination. The right hand. This is my right hand side. Okay, the right hand side of the brain takes that into account and is constantly looking out in the world to take into account its relationship with the world. Whereas the left hemisphere of the brain is all about numbers and statistics, and it's essentially like a robot. So when a person has a stroke and that part of their brain is damaged, where they lose this function, this ability to dream, to have a spiritual aspect, then they become like a robot. And of course we see that. You say you don't see it. Yes, you do. You see it. You see it in our leaders, because they are inert. They are inert socially to us as a people. They are inert to suffering. They're inert to hardship. They're inert to the fact that we are being saviotised. We're being enslaved by our political systems, our institutions, our legal system. Fluoride willingly added to dumb us down, so we become like robots, easily controlled. I mean, what sort of human being would want to do that if they were normal? To control another as their own slave. I noted it was possibly the last 10 years, there was a brothel madam who brought some people over, I believe young women across from overseas, and put them into servitude and slavery. And of course Australia was abhorred that they would do such a thing. Now hang on a sec. What about financial slavery? What about drug-induced slavery? I mean, the pimp, he wants all his prostitutes to be on drugs because he can control them. So it's not pretty at all. All right, Beata, I'm not going to go to you because you're laughing. I'll bring up. What I'll do, please do. Okay, all right. I'm going to bring up Beata. You've got the floor, Beata. Hang on, no, you haven't. I've marked up the deck. There you go. You've got the floor.
Thank you, Arnie. I must just say that I can't wait for social credit to take over this planet and the peoples, because that's the only way out of this schizophrenic world that we're living in. This is what Roderick Tweedy and Ian McGilchrist call it, don't they? Mm-hmm. Also, Rudolf Steiner was very high on consciousness, and he was saying that within 20th century, he presumed the consciousness of the people would be such that a lot of suffering would be cut out. Everything will get better because we're achieving that connectedness with the whole universe and every human being and spirit of that human being is connected to it. It didn't happen. Maybe because they started using fluoride in water supply. I don't know, but I'm waiting for the social credit to take over. There is no need for the mothers to hurry to work and push the children into their childcare. I would strongly appeal to stay home. Do something for your family, which is from within you. Not just act like a robot, which of course everyone pushes you to do. Faster.
Thank you. Thank you, Beata. That's beautiful. Yeah, faster is not necessarily better. Beautiful summary. Now, when we talk about social credit, to me, social credit is a policy of freedom. And when we start seeing our governments mass medicating the whole population to control them, and that's, I have no trouble saying it straight to your face. In actual fact, it's in Hansard in Victoria. This was a policy of our government to, just to control the people, and they use fluoride. Jennifer.
Well, the natural law, or God's law, is innate in all creation. And we ignore it at our peril, really. So the more we can get back to a natural way of life in every way, and I think can be difficult to do this, but the more we can do that, the better we are. To live according or in tune with nature is the best way to go. And this is all part of social credit.
That's it. Thank you very much, Jennifer. That's exactly right. I'm going to cut across to our website, alor.org. This is the library, and I'm just going to scroll down, and we've got Alexander Solzhenitsyn here, and I found a paper that he delivered to the Templeton Society, 1983, I think it is, and here it is. Here it's called "Men Have Forgotten God," and "Godlessness: The First Step to the Gulag." And to me, it's fascinating that here's this man who spent time in the gulags. He spent time in Siberia. He was a slave. He was a communist slave. So he knows what Bolshevism, Sovietization is all about. He tasted it firsthand. In this lecture paper here, he says 60 million Russians were put to the sword. 60 million were slaughtered in order to attempt to control them. This was the experiment of the despots in that nation. And I understand China was up around the 100 million mark. Now, fluoride, why fluoride? Why is it important? Why is health so important? Because directionally, this is where we're headed. We're headed to this godless state, back to these steps towards the gulag. That's where we're headed. And fluoride is part of those steps. Free nations, Europe doesn't have fluoride in the water. They've taken it out. The only nation in Europe that does is Ireland, and I find that fascinating because they were kicking up a stink around the Margaret Thatcher time, and everyone can arc up or like her or love her, the Iron Maiden, whatever she was, but the Iron Lady, whatever. But the point is that when she was having trouble with Ireland was when the Brits paid for fluoride to be added to the water to Ireland. Ireland is the only nation in Europe that has fluoride in their water. And that was around that time. So don't tell me these things are all lining up. The ducks are in a row, and our governments are using it to subdue us. Don't think it's not. So health is important. You don't want to be old and debilitated. You want to keep your health until you fall off the perch. That's my hope. And I'm so pleased that in our family we concentrate on health. Judith Auchterlonie.
It's a good way to go, Arnie. I agree with you. Let's die healthy. Why not? I can't add to that really, Arnie.
No worries. All right. I'm happy with where we are. I'm going to do a final lap of the forum. I really appreciate you ladies contributing. It hasn't been easy getting to this forum. We've had a few false starts. We've had computer systems, network systems. Jenny's got a thunderstorm around her ears at the moment in Narracourt, and she's already had a power failure this morning. It's to me, it's all part of it, but I believe we've got it. We've got there today. So let's do a final lap. Jenny Grundy.
Yes, well, talking about all these things happening towards a certain end, and I believe it is, because we see so much centralisation of everything now, and we are heading openly towards global governance, as they call it. And another thing on the agenda at the moment is this drug situation, going to legalise marijuana. Well, Mark said that in his manifesto that the Western world the communists needed to get the Western world using drugs. And all these things happening around us, and it seems rather pessimistic. We don't want to be like that, but I think for those who do understand a little of the history of these things, we can see it happening around us, and it's all leading towards world government, the destruction of nations, and so I like to point this out to people when I can.
No worries. Thank you for that, Jenny. That's exactly right. This is certainly no accident. There's design in it. Always has been design in it, and they've been at this game since the French Revolution. Been trying to bring about the destruction of essentially Christendom, and most specifically now the English-speaking peoples. They've targeted. That's what they're after. And these Marxists that are in our universities with all these programs, brainwashing our kids, sexualizing our kids when they're little pups, and fluoride is part of the problem. Diet is part of the problem, but significantly the most important part, the anchor of all of this, is Christendom. It's that spirit inside of you. You are not matter in motion. God made you unique. He made you unique, and he put the Spirit of God inside of you. And your creative capacity, your ability to express who you are. You only have to look at these illustrations behind me. Look at the steelwork of that bird in the cage. I mean, that to me is beautiful, and that's creative people expressing themselves. Beata.
I probably express myself in the garden those days, building strange garden furniture. What else could I tell you? I don't know.
That's enough.
I've got
That's enough.
terrible...
Hang on. Let me come back. Just start again on your thyroid.
No.
You done? Okay. All right.
Yeah, done.
No worries. All right. And Judith Auchterlonie, final comments, please.
Final comment, Arnie, would be to encourage people to research fluoride thoroughly and be prepared to read what they may not agree with to start with. Just look at it, read it and absorb it, and then make a decision about fluoride. Because as you say, and as we have said, if it is going to dumb down our spirituality, it's a very serious problem.
That's it. Thank you very much for that. All right, this is Arnie Lukes, and this is Crossroads. We're signing off for now. Once was a swagman camped by a billabong, under the shade of a coolabah tree, as he sat, as he watched and waited while his billy boiled. Who'll come a waltzing Matilda with me?